Welcome back. You're watching Business Wrap. Now, the GDP figures for the first quarter were released by government recently. The GDP was posted at 8.8%, is one of the highest in the 2.5 years period. Now, and to get a detailed overview of the health of the economy, our correspondent Sidhant Sibal caught up with Dr. Govinda Rao, a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council.
The GDP figure for the year 2010-11 is out. This first quarter figure is at a roaring and a robust 8.8. The growth has been highest in almost 2.5 years. But many believe the growth is manufacturing-led and agriculture, even though good is not on projected lines. I have with me Dr. Govinda Rao, member of Prime Minister Economic Advisory Council, to talk more on the figure and decode the numbers. Welcome to the show, sir. So my first question, how do you react to the numbers?
Yeah, I think the numbers look very optimistic. You know, as compared to the corresponding quarter last year, where the economy grew just about 6%, we have a growth rate of 8.8%, which is by all accounts very optimistic, and it shows that the economy is definitely on the path of recovery. The important thing is that agricultural growth, which was very low last time and in the corresponding quarter of last year, now is recording somewhere about 2.8%. And more importantly, the manufacturing sector growth is 12.4%, which was almost 6% in the last corresponding quarter. Now, 12.4% is not likely to continue at this level. Definitely, the overall, sort of 8.8% growth in this quarter. In fact, the Economic Advisory Council has projected the growth rate for the whole year at 8.5%. And therefore, I think as we go along, given that you have a very good monsoon and a fairly even spread except in the eastern region of the country, you are likely to have a growth rate of 4.5 to 5% of in the case of agriculture alone this year, because we are coming from a low base. I mean, last year it was 0.2. So if agriculture itself grows at that level, and then the manufacturing sector, I think on an average, in fact, part of the reason why 12.5% growth, 4% growth was recorded is because of the low base year growth corresponding, it was just about 6%.
So, but that is the point, manufacturing driven growth. There is no growth in infrastructure. The consumption level, both private and government, is low, stagnant almost. So, what do you say about this?
Well, I mean, this on the demand side, if you really look at, there have been some problems, because you see I think they used the wrong deflator to get the 3.7% growth, and their revised growth after using some other deflator, it's not very clear what exactly they did, is over 10%. So now, the point is that much of the demand, sort of consumption demand from the manufacturing sector, from infrastructure or government consumption or the private consumption will be, obviously will decelerate, because you see the effect of the pay revision and all that is not there anymore. Government consumption expenditure increases because if there is a significant increase in the pay revision and things like that. But, but overall, I mean, I don't really see much of a problem. I mean, definitely the manufacturing sector is not going to grow at 12.4% for the whole year. There was a base year, sort of base effect, and then gradually I have a feeling that 9.5% growth, maybe close to 10% growth in the manufacturing sector would be a very optimistic thing.
So coming back to the agriculture growth, Sir C. Rangarajan just recently said that in next quarter we might see decline in growth, and given the fact that you just said that your expectation projection is at 4.5, and in first quarter we just got 2.8, around 3, will we be able to achieve the 4.5 target for the agriculture?
Agricultural growth is a seasonal thing. It's now you have 2.8% growth is basically quite a lot of the non-food grains growth in the within the agricultural sector, because this is agriculture and allied activities. Most of it is allied, because the sowing season has started. I mean, in fact, now sowing season is practically over. Now, in the next quarter, you are not going to get your output in. Your output will come only in the quarter subsequently, because the sowing season is over. And so you had April, May, June, July, August, September is the time when the crops are all sown, and September end, it's only in the October quarter that you will get the output. So the growth rate, you will have to really look at the corresponding, only when the output comes in. So you should not really look in the agricultural side. This is a quarter to quarter growth is a bit of a misleading thing. You need to really see the annual picture.
So another point, inflation. Inflation is much more than growth. So there's almost negative growth and almost no growth.
No. That is not the correct way to interpret. The growth that we are talking about is in real terms. You see, this 8.8% growth is not in nominal terms. There is a real growth. Now, on top of it, you have to add inflation. And if you add inflation, your nominal growth is real growth plus the inflation rate. So, it's not that the economy is not growing. So, that is the wrong interpretation of things.
Sir, but then how do you see inflation as a challenge?
Inflation is a challenge. Initially it started with agricultural products and basically the food inflation, and then afterwards it has spread to the non-food side. Food inflation now is not really a very prominent thing. I think the numbers that will come in this week or the next week will show that we have gone into the single digit again. And the Economic Advisory Council's view is that for the year as a whole, by March 31st, you will end up with an inflation rate of somewhere about 6.5%, which is not a major, major thing. But maybe, I mean, because the inflation has spread to the non-food side, you may, it is possible that the Reserve Bank may have to take some more steps in order to contain the liquidity in the system.
So my next question relates to the Reserve Bank itself. Do you expect strong measures by the central bank?
I really don't think there will be a strong measure by the central bank. Central bank has been very cautious and it has been responding to the situation extremely well. And of course, at the end of the day, they have to take a call. But my own feeling is that there will be some minor changes, some further baby steps. Basically, they have to work on the expectations. Maybe it's possible that they may increase the rates by 25 basis points. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is something which, as I said, they have to take a call. But at the same time, I think, I mean, my personal feeling is that some amount of containing liquidity may have to be done. So that's where the thing is that. But then I think we should not really be unduly worried about the inflation. I think it's not out of totally out of our control. I think given the fact that you have fairly good monsoon, and I think gradually the things will settle down.
So your projection, your council's projection at 8.5, will it be achievable?
8.5% of growth rate this year is possible to achieve. The fact that in the first quarter it has been 8.8, and then gradually, I mean, it is not going to decelerate sharply. Of course, the manufacturing sector growth will become slightly less, but then the service sector also will start picking up, and maybe for the year as a whole, I think 8.5% is something which everybody talks about. In fact, now people are talking about even a higher growth rate.
Yeah, IMF
9.4. I mean, and apart from IMF, even the people, people constantly keep updating their numbers, and then I think 8.5% is a reasonable conservative number. I think you can expect the economy to grow at that level.
Sir, 9% next fiscal.
I mean, next fiscal is far too long.
So, but then is it possible?
Well, I mean, the Economic Advisory Council has actually suggested that, the next year, 2010-11, the growth rate will increase to something like 11-12. The growth rate will increase to 9%. So, but then that's a far cry. I mean, I don't want to speculate on that.
And then will there be chances of overheating in the economy?
Well, I mean, again, that depends on how the economy, what are the various factors at work, both domestic and international. Now, at this particular moment, I don't think we should really be concerned about overheating or anything of the sort. And I think we have a fairly good food grain sort of position. We have good crops, and then of course good food stocks. And then I mean, I don't really see any sort of and the manufacturing sector is doing well. Infrastructure is going to be a bottleneck, but then I think a lot more of investment will have to be forthcoming.
So, but largely you see domestic demand driven GDP growth, not external.
That's always been the case. That's always been the case. But that does not mean that at the margin export sector doesn't matter. I mean, exports are slowing down. I mean, that's one of the causes of worry. I mean,
we might be affected by the double-dit recession in the Western economies.
Well, I mean, you see, these are all speculations. Okay. In the sense that we still do not have any clear evidence of double dip inflation. We don't. I mean, the double dip recession in these economies. We don't have any clear evidence. I mean, the employment numbers from the United States show that it's not too bad. But we don't really have a very clear picture as yet.
So my final question on the Commonwealth Games. The Commonwealth Games are coming in. So do you expect them to boost the GDP? How will they contribute the GDP?
The point is that it's Commonwealth Games themselves are not going to be it's not that so much of this thing will happen. You see, the spending for the Commonwealth Games is like giving a stimulus, right? Now, there is a lot of infrastructure improvement, there is a lot of there is a lot of movement of people and sort of people coming into the country, the hotels being occupied, the televisions being occupied with things, there is a lot more of activity is created, but quite a lot of it is already created in the sort of spending on the various infrastructure projects. I mean, various stadia, and then beautification of Delhi, and spending on various Connaught Place is still being dug up.
So you expect a boost then, I believe.
There is a certain amount of demand led growth that will take place. But there is always there is always a concern. In fact, if you have seen in last few weeks in the press, there is always a concern about the lack of transparency in the procurement policies, lack of these things, and that creates a lot of concern for the people. I mean, ultimately it is the taxpayers' money that has to be used, and the diversion of taxpayers' money from allocation to, say, for example, some of the very priority areas to this. I am not very certain that that's a desirable thing, and more important than that, I mean, the way in which the contracts have been given, the way in which the entire procurement has been done, it raises a lot more of concern to us. Games are a good thing. I mean, it's not that you see. I mean, these are the things which which give a lot of fillip to the youngsters. Give a sense of participation in the things, but I think we need to put our governance in a much better shape than what we have.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for talking to DD News, sir. So let me add a bit. Numbers only tell part of the Indian growth story. Indian growth story is much more than GDP numbers. It's about how many Indians are happy. This is Sidhant Sibal for DD News.
I am Govinda Rao, the member Prime Minister Economic Advisory Council, sharing his thoughts about the health of the Indian economy with our correspondent.